It seems that the scandal between Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein is still not going to stop as a major secret about their relationship was revealed a few minutes ago. Ghislaine Maxwell's friend, who is said to be involved in Prince Andrew's troubles, participated in an exclusive interview and revealed the whole truth about this scandalous case. What are you waiting for? Let's start the video. In a revealing interview, Ghislaine Maxwell, a close friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, shed light on the complicated and controversial relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew. The details she shared were unexpected and provided a fresh perspective on the connections and dynamics among the key figures involved. When Ghislaine was asked the first question, "When were you last in touch with Ghislaine Maxwell?" she responded with notable frankness. "Those in touch with her, about 3.5 weeks ago. The last couple of weeks it was pretty obvious, due to the pressure on Prince Andrew, that Ghislaine was the target. And, I don't want a red wave, a red flag in front of the FBI. I believe in supporting my friend, and I believe that she is a victim of Jeffrey Epstein just like many other people were. It doesn't mean that what she did was right, and she should pay for her crimes." Ghislaine's response highlighted a few critical points that have been subject to public speculation and legal scrutiny. Firstly, her mention of being in touch with Ghislaine about 3.5 weeks ago indicated that despite the intense media coverage and legal proceedings, Ghislaine was still maintaining some level of communication with her close circle. This timeline placed their last contact in a period when the pressure on Prince Andrew was intensifying, likely due to his connections with Epstein and the subsequent public and legal fallout. Ghislaine's admission that the last couple of weeks it was pretty obvious, due to the pressure on Prince Andrew that Ghislaine was the target, underscored a significant shift in the investigation's focus. It suggested that the scrutiny on Prince Andrew had indirectly increased the attention on Ghislaine, perhaps as a means to further unravel the network of individuals associated with Epstein. The pressure on Prince Andrew likely refers to the mounting allegations and the growing demand for him to provide more answers regarding his relationship with Epstein and the accusations against him. Ghislaine's cautious remark about not wanting a red wave, a red flag in front of the FBI, hinted at the delicate and precarious position she found herself in. As someone close to Ghislaine, she was acutely aware of the potential legal implications and the heightened surveillance surrounding anyone associated with Epstein's circle. Her concern reflected the broader atmosphere of caution and the legal ramifications that had enveloped those connected to the scandal. Ghislaine's declaration of support for her friend, despite acknowledging Ghislaine's culpability, added a complex layer to her narrative. "I believe in supporting my friend, and I believe that she is a victim of Jeffrey Epstein just like many other people were," she stated. This sentiment echoed the arguments made by some of Ghislaine's defenders, who have claimed that she, too, was manipulated and victimized by Epstein. By positioning Ghislaine as another victim, Ghislaine sought to humanize her and provide a counter-narrative to the portrayal of Ghislaine solely as an enabler of Epstein's crimes. However, Ghislaine's acknowledgement that it doesn't mean that what she did was right, and she should pay for her crimes, demonstrated a recognition of the severity of Ghislaine's actions. This balanced view acknowledged the duality of Ghislaine's role as both a victim and a perpetrator. Ghislaine's statement encapsulated the complex moral and legal terrain surrounding Ghislaine Maxwell, illustrating the difficulty in reconciling her personal relationship with the undeniable evidence of wrongdoing. The conversation then moved to the nature of Ghislaine's crimes. When asked, "But how do you think her crimes were?" Ghislaine hesitated, showing deference to the judicial process. "I don't know. I'm going to wait for the court to say, but obviously there was, reading the indictment, a pattern of some kind of grooming of women for Jeffrey." This acknowledgement of a pattern of some kind of grooming aligned with the charges against Ghislaine, suggesting a methodical approach in recruiting young women for Epstein. The interviewer pressed further, challenging Ghislaine's stance with the question, So why would you think that Ghislaine Maxwell is in any way a victim? Given the depth of the allegations, the consistent pattern of her acting as some kind of madam to Jeffrey Epstein, where she groomed very young, often underage girls to be sexually abused. Yelena responded with a complex view of Ghislaine's situation. Okay, I understand, but I also know that she tried many times to get away from Jeffrey, and he kept keeping her there, luring her there. This statement suggested that Ghislaine was under some form of coercion or manipulation by Epstein, despite her involvement in his criminal activities. Yelena's assertion that Ghislaine attempted multiple times to distance herself from Epstein introduced the idea that she might have been ensnared in his web against her will, adding layers to the narrative of her culpability. The portrayal of Ghislaine as both a manipulative recruiter and a trapped individual is central to Yelena's defense. This duality highlights the psychological and emotional complexity that can exist in abusive relationships, where victims might also play roles in perpetuating the abuse, either out of fear, manipulation, or dependency. Yelena's comments bring forth a broader discussion on accountability and victimhood. It raises the question of how much agency Ghislaine had in her actions and whether her attempts to escape Epstein's influence mitigate her involvement in his crimes. This perspective does not absolve her of responsibility, but suggests that the context of her actions is more intricate than it appears on the surface. The interviewer challenged Yelena's assertion that Ghislaine had attempted many times to distance herself from Epstein. Oh, come on, you don't believe that? Come on, you don't believe that for a moment? Many times to get away? She'd just spent a year hiding in her house quite comfortably and easily when she wanted to. She could have gotten away from him at any stage if she had any of the money, most of which probably came from Epstein. This pointed question aimed to undermine the narrative of Ghislaine as a trapped individual, suggesting instead that she had ample opportunity and resources to extricate herself from Epstein's influence. Yelena's response was measured but firm. Okay, I think you'll find in the end she doesn't have as much money as has been reported, even in that indictment. This assertion suggested that Ghislaine's financial independence might be overstated, countering the perception that she lived comfortably off Epstein's wealth. The interviewer pushed back, citing evidence from law enforcement. Well, the police say they found numerous bank accounts which have over $20 million sitting there. This information pointed to substantial financial resources, implying Ghislaine had significant means at her disposal. Yelena remained resolute in her stance. Yes, but I think you're going to find most of that money's not hers. This response introduced the possibility that the funds found in those accounts were not directly controlled or owned by Ghislaine, complicating the picture of her financial situation. Whose money is it then? The interviewer pressed, seeking clarification. Well, that's for the courts to see, Yelena replied, indicating that the legal proceedings would eventually uncover the truth about the ownership of the funds. The interviewer then questioned Yelena's trust in Ghislaine's claims. Why do you think it's not hers? Yelena's answer was direct. Because she's told me it's not hers. This reliance on Ghislaine's words suggested a deep level of trust between the two women, yet it also opened Yelena to skepticism about her friend's credibility. Okay, do you believe everything Ghislaine tells you? Do you think she may be putting out whatever narrative she likes? The interviewer's question highlighted the potential for Ghislaine to manipulate the narrative to her advantage, given her precarious legal situation. Yelena defended her position by appealing to her background and understanding of financial matters. Listen, I have a degree from the Wharton School, so I understand bank accounts and business. I don't know what they were doing, but she said that Jeffrey was in control of most of that money. By referencing her education, Yelena sought to bolster her credibility and underscore her ability to critically assess financial information. When asked, why would he not let her leave? Yelena's response was telling. Because there were things that he had on her that if she had left in an angry way would have destroyed her life earlier. Now, obviously her life is destroyed now, but Jeffrey Epstein, look, Leslie Wexner's afraid of him. Glenn Dubin is afraid of him. Jeffrey never let even Dubin go. Alan Dershowitz, am I afraid of them even though he claims, that he worships Jeffrey? Jeffrey is a very threatening guy. Graydon Carter was afraid of him. So to say the only person who can't be afraid of him is Ghislaine Maxwell is just wrong. This explanation suggests that Epstein held significant leverage over Ghislaine, which he used to keep her within his sphere of influence. Yelena emphasized that Epstein's reach and intimidation extended beyond Ghislaine, affecting many powerful and prominent individuals. Leslie Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Alan Dershowitz, and Graydon Carter are mentioned as examples of those who feared Epstein, illustrating the pervasive and insidious nature of his control. The interviewer countered with skepticism, recounting a personal encounter with Ghislaine. Well, listen, I met Ghislaine at a book launch in 2013, briefly, for a few minutes. I was dealing with Stephen Fry and other people who were at this book launch. I don't think I've ever met a more confident person in my life, or a more sort of social gadfly floating around the party. She knew everybody, super confident and strong. You could tell all those things. The idea that she was somehow the victim here, I've got to be honest with you, I find laughable. I mean, she was part of his world for decades. And the idea that you're trying to portray her as a victim when actually the victims are these poor underage girls that were terrorized for decades by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, many people will find quite repulsive. This rebuttal underscores the dissonance between Ghislaine's public persona and the narrative of victimhood presented by Yelena. The interviewer described Ghislaine as a confident and well-connected socialite, a stark contrast to the image of a manipulated and trapped individual. This perspective aligns with the widely held view that Ghislaine was a willing and active participant in Epstein's predatory activities, which led to the exploitation and abuse of numerous underage girls. In addition, Yelena acknowledged the intensity of public reaction, particularly on social media, stating, "Okay, and I understand that, and believe me, every one of them has hit me on Twitter." This remark reflected the strong and often polarized opinions about Ghislaine Maxwell and her involvement with Epstein. Despite the backlash, Yelena remained steadfast in her defense of Ghislaine, emphasizing the importance of distinguishing between the public's perception and the underlying realities. She began by reaffirming the centrality of the victims in the Epstein case. First of all, the main victims are the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, the young girls, or even the older girls. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. Underage girls should not have been massaging people. I totally agree with that. This statement highlighted Yelena's acknowledgement of the egregious abuse suffered by the young women exploited by Epstein and underscored her support for justice for these victims. Yelena's comments then turned to the issue of Ghislaine Maxwell's own victimization. But to say that Jeffrey did not have a hold on Ghislaine is wrong. I understand many people tell me how confident she appeared. She wasn't. She had very little self-confidence in reality. Jeffrey could reduce her to tears instantaneously. This assertion aimed to address a common misconception, that Ghislaine's outward confidence and social prowess belied her internal struggles and vulnerability. The interviewer posed a critical question. Well, Jeffrey died last year. Why didn't Ghislaine, if she was so afraid of him and in his thrall, the minute that he died, why wouldn't she then go to the FBI and say, "You know what? I was equally also under his power. I was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. And I will tell you everything you need to know. Why did it take a year? And why did she go into hiding?" This query pointed to a significant issue in the public's perception of Ghislaine's actions. The expectation was that her fear and manipulation by Epstein would have prompted her to come forward as soon as she was no longer under his control. Instead, Ghislaine reportedly went into hiding and did not immediately cooperate with authorities. Yelena responded with an explanation she attributed to Ghislaine's perspective. From what she's told me, what her defense of that is that she did what her lawyers told her to do. Okay? And I'm not a lawyer, so I can't, parse it for you. But they felt that going in because of the circus atmosphere of the case and the feeding frenzy, it's sort of like the Salem witch trials 2.0, they felt that she couldn't go into the FBI and have a somewhat civil conversation. According to Yelena, Ghislaine's legal team advised against cooperating with the FBI immediately due to the highly charged and sensationalized nature of the case. They likened the media frenzy and public scrutiny to a modern-day Salem witch trial, suggesting that it would be impossible for Ghislaine to engage with law enforcement in a fair and non-confrontational manner under such circumstances. The interviewer countered this defense by pointing to the disparity between Ghislaine's actions and the ongoing struggle for justice for Epstein's victims. What she did instead was spend millions of dollars in cash to buy a very large remote property where she was able to hide in considerable luxury and carry on leading her life. This is while justice was being fought for these poor young girls who had been abused and, as the prosecution now says, groomed by Ghislaine Maxwell for many, many years. That doesn't seem quite the way you're painting it. It looks to me like somebody who's used to having a rich and privileged life, wanting to continue doing it and thwarting justice for these young girls who were abused. This critique highlights a perceived inconsistency between Ghislaine's purported fear and her actions following Epstein's death. The purchase of a luxurious and remote property, coupled with her avoidance of immediate cooperation with authorities, was seen as contrary to the behavior expected from someone truly seeking redemption or justice. Instead, it suggested a continued pursuit of a privileged lifestyle and a potential disregard for the ongoing suffering of Epstein's victims. The interviewer questioned Ghislaine's decision not to flee the country, asking, "So then why didn't she flee the country? I mean, on the one hand, I think you're going to find that house isn't exactly hers either. I think you're going to find out a lot of things." This question highlighted a perception that Ghislaine might have had the means and opportunity to escape or avoid scrutiny, but chose not to do so. The interviewer suggested that Ghislaine's property might not truly belong to her, implying that there were more complex financial and legal arrangements at play. Yelena responded with a degree of caution. "When you say it wasn't hers, I mean Jeffrey Epstein couldn't have bought it. He was dead." This clarification addressed the fact that Epstein's death would preclude him from making any posthumous purchases or financial decisions. However, Yelena's comment about the property's ownership implied that there were other parties or arrangements involved, further complicating the narrative. The interviewer pressed further, "I know, but it's not hers." Yelena's response was non-specific. "Whose is it then?" She replied, "I can't say because I'm not implicating other people." This response suggested that the details of the property's ownership were sensitive and potentially involved other individuals or entities, which Yelena was unwilling or unable to disclose. The interviewer then questioned Yelena's trust in Ghislaine's statements. "Do you believe everything Ghislaine Maxwell tells you, or do you think she's just pulling the wool over your eyes?" Yelena defended her position, stating, "No, because I knew from the beginning what was going on, and I knew from her sister also what was going on, and I've talked to them about these issues from the beginning." This response indicated that Yelena had been closely involved with Ghislaine and her sister Isabel and had a long-standing understanding of the situation. When asked about the aftermath of the 2008 plea agreement involving Epstein, Yelena elaborated on her knowledge of the situation. "What was going on after the 2008 plea agreement? I had frank conversations with both Isabel and Ghislaine Maxwell, so I had an idea of what was happening. And she explained a lot of things with Jeffrey, and she wasn't strong enough to leave him." This statement highlighted Yelena's assertion that Ghislaine's inability to leave Epstein was not due to a lack of opportunity, but rather an issue of emotional and psychological control. Yelena suggested that Ghislaine had conveyed a sense of helplessness and lack of personal strength in dealing with Epstein's influence. This perspective portrays Ghislaine as a figure trapped in a manipulative relationship rather than a fully autonomous actor. The interviewer pointed out, "There's a relevance to this involving Prince Andrew, which we'll come to, but Ghislaine Maxwell could say right up to the point that he was convicted of being a bad guy. Well, I wasn't really sure. But he can't be after he's convicted. Then he's a convicted bad guy. Then you know what the guy is. And she carried on for another 10, 11, 12 years being his friend. And you've carried on supporting her, knowing she carried on being his close friend after he was convicted." This segment of the interview challenged Yelena's rationale for continuing her support of Ghislaine, despite the latter's actions. It emphasized the problematic nature of maintaining a friendship with someone who has been publicly and legally condemned for serious crimes. The interviewer's questions implied that Yelena's support could be seen as tacit endorsement or complicity, given Ghislaine's extended association with Epstein. Yelena's defense was rooted in personal gratitude and a sense of reciprocal loyalty. "Well, during my very difficult times, the Maxwell family was good to me, and I felt that, I didn't see her every day or talk to her every day, but they were there for me in my darkest hour, and I felt that I should be there to a certain degree." Yelena's response articulated a personal and emotional justification for her continued support of Ghislaine. She emphasized that her loyalty was grounded in her own experiences with the Maxwell family, who had supported her during challenging periods. This support, according to Yelena, created a sense of obligation and reciprocal loyalty, influencing her decision to stand by Ghislaine despite the latter's controversial actions and associations. The interviewer posed a critical question. "Do you think it might have been a good idea if Ghislaine Maxwell had not continued to be good close friends with Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted of very serious offenses against underage girls?" This question raised a fundamental issue about Ghislaine's decision-making and moral responsibility. The premise was that maintaining a friendship with someone convicted of such grave offenses could be seen as morally unacceptable and potentially damaging to her own reputation and credibility. Yelena Maxwell responded with a defense of Ghislaine's actions. "Well, believe me, she limited her contact substantially. This response acknowledged that while Ghislaine did not entirely sever ties with Epstein, she did make efforts to reduce their interaction. Yelena's defense suggested that Ghislaine attempted to navigate a complex situation by managing rather than completely ending her relationship with Epstein. The interviewer pressed further, highlighting the perceived inadequacy of this approach. "I know she didn't cut it off, and I'm not claiming that. I'm saying she tried to rebuild her life several times." This line of questioning underscored the perception that merely limiting contact was insufficient in the face of Epstein's criminal convictions. The interviewer implied that a complete disassociation would have been a more appropriate response. In response, Yelena remarked, "Quite easy, isn't it, to cut off contact with a convicted bad guy? You just have nothing to do with him." This comment pointed out the simplicity of severing ties with someone who has been legally condemned for serious crimes. It implied that, from an outside perspective, Ghislaine's failure to entirely cut off contact with Epstein might be viewed as a significant ethical oversight. Yelena countered this by asserting, "She couldn't, okay? She's not that strong." This response suggested that Ghislaine's inability to fully disconnect from Epstein was not merely a matter of choice, but was influenced by personal limitations and psychological factors. Yelena's defense implied that Ghislaine's emotional and psychological resilience played a role in her continued association with Epstein, portraying her as someone who struggled with significant personal weaknesses. The interviewer challenged this perspective by referring to their own impression of Ghislaine. I understand. To the woman I met at a book launch, I can tell you the idea that she would have been too weak to walk away from a bloke convicted of bad behavior. The interviewer began by comparing Ghislaine Maxwell's situation to that of Prince Andrew. Let me bring in Prince Andrew now, because he also stayed friendly with Jeffrey Epstein after that conviction. And again, you could construct a defense. Potentially, Epstein was so secretive and manipulative that you may not have known the full scale of what he was doing. But once he's convicted, that's a different thing. Once all that detail came out and he admitted it, at that point surely you sever the links. Why did Prince Andrew continue seeing him? And how much do you think Prince Andrew knows that we don't know? This question highlighted a critical issue: the responsibility of individuals who maintained relationships with Epstein after his conviction. The interviewer implied that continued contact with Epstein after his legal troubles became public suggested a troubling disregard for the seriousness of his offenses. They also questioned the extent of Prince Andrew's awareness regarding Epstein's criminal activities, suggesting that there might be unknown details about his level of knowledge. Ghislaine Maxwell responded with a critical view of Prince Andrew's understanding and actions. Prince Andrew doesn't know a lot, partially because he's not that intelligent, and he is spoiled and entitled, so he didn't really ask questions about what was happening. Ghislaine's comments painted Prince Andrew as lacking in both intellectual curiosity and moral responsibility. She suggested that his privilege and entitlement contributed to a lack of genuine inquiry into Epstein's activities. According to Ghislaine, Prince Andrew's failure to sever ties with Epstein was a result of his personal characteristics rather than a deliberate choice to ignore the gravity of Epstein's offenses. The discussion then broadened to include other high-profile individuals who continued to associate with Epstein after his conviction. But as far as people staying in touch with Jeffrey Epstein after the 2008 conviction, there were parties with people like Katie Couric, Chelsea Handler, Woody Allen. The interviewer interjected, focusing on the credibility of including certain figures. Okay, well, Woody Allen maybe, but Ghislaine expanded on the cultural context of the time. So unfortunately, in 2008, which was a lifetime ago in terms of Me Too, the women's movement, etc., many people flocked to Jeffrey Epstein's house after that 2008 conviction. So, to attack everybody that did that, Ghislaine suggested that in the pre- and after Me Too era, societal attitudes and awareness about misconduct were different. She implied that the post-2008 context lacked the heightened sensitivity and scrutiny that would later emerge with the Me Too movement. Consequently, the behavior of people attending Epstein's gatherings might have been more common or less scrutinized at that time. What do you think about Ghislaine Maxwell's revelations? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.